Merci de bien vouloir laisser les trois.
Thank you. Please leave the three first rows
Heureux de se
for the navigators to sit in. They're not here yet. We're delighted to see them and to see you.
Là, c'est des navigateurs, ceux qui sont là. Donc, ils sont, pour l'instant,
Ladies and gentlemen, navigators.
Mesdames et messieurs les... Ça marche, hein? Mesdames et messieurs les navigateurs, vous occupez...
Ladies and gentlemen, navigators, you are to sit in the first three rows, front rows.
Mesdames et messieurs les navigateurs, vous occupez les trois premiers rangs.
First three front rows. You're on
Prêts à venir rapidement,
call,
même ceux qui sont en
ready
milieu
to
de rang.
jump up quickly, even those of you who are on the third line, so you can come up and talk
Préparez-vous avec
in the microphone. So please get ready to talk very quickly and to jump up and come and talk to us. Am I going to say what? What? Navigator. I'm going to say navigator. Navigator. No, navigator. Let's have a look.
Allô, allô?
Mais là, ça va être lancé.
They're navigators and skippers.
Ça va être lancé.
It's a general term.
Bonsoir à tous. Bienvenue
Good evening. Welcome to the One Ocean Summit. This last forum of the day brings together great navigators and skippers and testimonial that testify to the fragility of the oceans. And we're delighted to welcome them here this evening to listen to them. I'm going to leave the floor to Mr. Français Vallat, founding member of the French cluster, to chair this session. Good session.
Bonsoir tous.
Good evening to all of you. As Eloise has just said, it's an honor, a joy, as far as I'm concerned, a seafarer, to really welcome the true seafarers that you are, men and women, seamen and women. A lot of the great navigators, divers, rowers who've explored and crossed the ocean, legitimate people who can testify to what's happening in the seas. A few words to thank Olivier Poivre d'Arvor, and his team, of which the wonderful Héloïse, for having having had to deal with the stress and tension over the past few days to organize all of these meetings. The situation of the past times, COVID, toing and froing from people who were going to come and then couldn't come, who accepted then declined, means that we have a few people absent at the last moment, and I think in particular, and there will be others, and you know why I'm quoting this or mentioning them, Gérard Petitpas, we're going to miss you because of everything that you represent, with a companion of Éric Tabarly, and also we have Olivier de Kersauson. Olivier, I would like to say thank you for being here. He has come here from Tahiti, and so thank you very much for collaborating and being available and coming and bringing in Tahiti Nuit. They brought him in on form, and he's just landed, or just docked. So thank you very much for coming here for the call to answer this call for sailors. We are all here with 100 members signing, and since what was printed in Le Point, we've had new signatures, and it's still carrying on. And Anne, I'm going to ask Anne, whom you all know, to tell us what names of what people have signed the document since. Blair Tuke, Nathan Nartridge, Peter Banning, Sammy Patterson, Matthew Deonora, Thomas Wilden, Emma Outridge, Joe Batman, and Rose Blackman. These are foreigner people, well known, and they're excellent seafarers also. They've signed the declaration. Now, I'd also like to raise my hat to Christophe Onodibio, who wrote the article in Le Point and gave an echo to this appeal. Now, the session, well, I would have liked to have said many things, but I have to concentrate what I'm saying, and I would like you to be as brief as possible. Remember what's happening in the room. It's important, but it's less important that the world awaiting our words. Thousands of people are listening and following. The structure will be very restrictive because you are a family. Some of you told us actually how happy you were to meet up, and in a family you can't choose among your children or from your children. One of your children. So all of those who wanted to talk and say something, the idea would be for them to say something. This means that you have to be very strict in terms of how you take the floor. We have to stick to the timetable. Of course, with everything that you've experienced on the oceans, we're not going to get panicked faced with the challenge that we have ahead of us, even if it's going to be quite sort of rushed at some point. But Anne and myself, all of this is recorded, of course. We'll give you a follow-up to everything you've said, and we'll base ourselves on the Maritime cluster, the French Maritime cluster, and the various other clubs, the UNCL and various other associations. And let's remember that this is the emergency and urgency. Maybe decades for the oceans is too long. Isabelle talked about this at length. Despite this, fighting is still worth it. Remember the ozone layer? Everyone said it was finished and over, but actually human activity came into play and it worked. We may be beyond the last call now, but thanks to your appeal, we're going to try to stick to the real program, accelerate and go faster and even stronger. And I'm calling together, and each one of you for 3 minutes, Isabelle Autissier and Olivier de Kersauson, please. Thank you very much. You have 3 minutes, each of you. Good evening. We're going to start the discussions, and I'm delighted to see you all here.
One Ocean Summit, c'est super.
One Ocean Summit is fantastic. We're all delighted
Que l'océan soit
that the ocean be
ça vous a fait ça.
in the limelight. I think that this is something you felt when you lied on the deck and you looked at the stars. You thought, oh, look, there are millions of stars and not one
En tout cas,
has an ocean. And if there is an ocean, we haven't found it, and it must be very, very far away, because if there's an ocean, there is life. And so this is all it's fantastic. We've all signed, and it's great, but what? So what now?
tu l'as déjà dit.
Well, you've already said this, Francis, but my message is that, things are pressing. Things are happening in the oceans. I've thought about it a little. Since I started racing in deep seas, even if I am quite ancient, we
1 degré de plus sur
have
l'océan.
seen almost 1 degree more on the ocean, 30% more acidification, 50% more fewer mammals, 30 to 50% less coral reef, 30 to 40% of the plants less, and the mangrove 50% of the mangrove less, and a new case per minute of plastics in the ocean. Well, you can perceive this in the way you wish. Today, the oceans are suffocating and they are dying. And we all know this. We've all seen this. Plastics. Maybe we've even seen some. We know that the worst is microplastics, the ones we can't see. They accumulate in the food chain, and then one day or another, they end up in our stomachs.
On voit bien,
And so we can see this, and we know this, and for this, this is something researchers tell us often. Marine birds are disappearing because the stomachs are full of plastics. And so they have the impression that they're no longer hungry, despite the fact that they haven't actually eaten anything.
à un moment donné,
So at some point,
nous, les marins,
we seafarers,
super bonheur à naviguer.
we love sailing,
Partager
we love sharing also the beauty of the ocean, except that now we need to, put in some work and act. I know many of you are going to come and talk about
à agir un peu.
activities and actions that are being carried out each in their area and on their own, but I think that we need more and more to be united and do things together to go faster and further, because you said this, we have under a decade to achieve it. There are solutions, but we really now need to step up and change the way in which we are doing things and living, and we need to put all of this in application. And there's something I don't want to hear about, and that's the so-called punitive ecology or environment. What is punitive is not the ecology, the environment. It's when plankton disappears and there's less oxygen to breathe. What's punitive is when fish disappears and we can neither fish nor eat, and we have jobs and families that are suffering from it. What's punitive are the plastics I'm talking about. So we really need to understand that change, and I know you're going to illustrate it through the examples you're all going to give. Change really is more to do with joy, positive aspects and transformation. We're not here to repeat and reiterate what was done over the past centuries. We're there to think about the future and think of the tomorrow. And in order to do this, no longer in the name of future generations, because that's over now, we're doing this to do it for ourselves and for people who are already living on the planet.
Donc voilà, moi,
So that's it. And I think that everything has to go through the grindstone in our behavior, collective, individual. I know there are discussions about this in the room. We'll talk about it. And I think that we need to try and draw as much as possible positive elements. And we need to think that together maybe we'll be able to be slightly more clever than what we have been up until now. And what I'm going to suggest is the following, and then I'll just finish with this. I believe that to a certain extent we need to stay in contact and keep in touch. I think a lot of elements will be talked about this evening. We can do them together. We can unite and help each other. We can strengthen and reinforce what we do. So if you do agree, I think and I believe that the group, that's an informal group and that we've started setting up, we're not thinking of setting up a whole factory, but this group, informal group, can carry on working, thinking and operating together. Thank you very much. You talked about this to me, Isabelle, and we will do it. Thank you very much for being so lively. And added to what Olivier is going to say, I think it's going to be explosive and we're all going to be shaken up. Olivier, I'm going to be disappointing you then. Now, what I wanted to say is the following. I enjoyed what Isabelle just said. She talked about the real situation. She analysed the situation. And when you talk to her, you realize that they're figures and measurements. It's not just willful. This is the reality. And this is the reality. It's the reality that you and we and represent as a whole. We all represent it because of the willpower and the efforts we've made about the seas. You represent a power and a battle and this idea of strength. And this strength, I want it to join with the politicians' strength. Politicians, don't get it wrong. They're not all floppy or weak. They're fighters. They can make huge efforts, and they can make efforts to succeed, to get through, and to be elected. And so what we're going to trying to obtain from them altogether is that they give in this fight to save the seas just 5% of the energy that they've given to be elected. And if we only get that, we'll get people who are backing us, able to fight, and able to fight alongside us. And then the rest is that our daily awareness and transferring this huge love that we all have inside of us for the oceans, and this ocean that is a source of dream and heartbeat, and that I think would be important to not let disappear and be destroyed. Thank you, Olivier. Thank you, Isabelle. We can do what, we're never disappointed.
International summit. Here is the Minister of Sea of France. Donc, merci Annick Girardin.
Thank you, Annick Girardin, for coming and talking to us during this forum workshop, and you have the floor. Very quickly, navigators, seafarers, and dear Français, I came because your initiative is something that struck a chord. I love it, and I also came because this event, Français, is something you hold very dearly, and I wanted to tell you that, yes, there are politicians who know how to, to use elbow grease and have been committed for a while. It's very complex, but it's not because it's complex that we're not going to act. And I want to say that you are women and men who give us this dream, and today you're going further and you're saying, well, beyond the dream, come and be part of our reality and the one we see at sea. And I wanted to say that this blue planet is coming to an end. I can see this. I was born along the sea, along the coast. I lived all my life in Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon. I haven't always sailed, of course, but a little. I've sailed a little. And today, you coming to say and reminding us of the 2013 appeal in Paris, well, since then, there haven't been that many actions. And the fact that you're repeating these, the emergency of and the urgency of this is essential. The President of the Republic committed himself. He committed to organizing this summit. It was essential because we needed this. And in fact, the United Nations asked us for this. They said we need a strong voice. Is France able to take the relay and organize an important, substantial event now, because Lisbon is far. We need to act before Lisbon, and we need to act now so that in Lisbon we come to conclusions. It's a coalition, and within this context, the President of the Republic tomorrow will make announcements, such as other states. On the occasion of this meeting of heads of states, there will be a coalition launched to end up with negotiations in the United Nations regarding biodiversity and high seas, and the CAP agreement as well. We've just agreed. The CAP agreement, there are 6 countries missing when I arrive, so that it doesn't actually die from a beautiful life of 10 years. I didn't know that we had limitations in the agreements, and we said people commit, and then afterwards we don't commit because there are not enough countries that ratify it. Tomorrow it will be done. It will be ratified, and security at sea for fishermen, among others, is not in the bin, and illicit or illegal fisheries, or fishing, is something we'll be able to answer to. And the scourge of plastics pollution is something you talked about. There's an intensification of the fight that will be announced tomorrow with all of the strong commitments that are made. And here too, I'm the same as you. I believe that the announcements that will be made tomorrow will mean that we can move forward faster. France is a pioneer in governance of oceans, and with the creation of the Ministry for the Seas, we have Portugal and myself. So the real, true European combat is that there may be a council for the seas and ministers for the sea or for transport, whoever sees. Well, we need an overall vision of the sea, and we don't just want to work in silos as we do it today. I wanted to come by and tell you this and carry on. I'll be there alongside with you on many subjects. I had many things to say to you, but Français said, be short. So that's it. I'll be quick and see you later. Thank you. very much. Thank you, Annick. That was fantastic. Fantastic, Annick. Now, I'm going to call. We're still already late, but too bad. You're going to increase the speed and make it more active. Éric Loizeau, Patrick Deixonne, please come and talk to us and tell us about the scourge of plastics in the sea.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Hello, good evening. Shall I start? Yes, I'm delighted to have been invited to this meeting. It's a very important one. In fact, I'm just going to give you an overview very quickly. I navigated and raced for many years. I wasn't very responsible at the time, and this was a few years ago, of course. I used to throw my bins in the sea. I have a problem with plastics because there was so much on the boat I didn't know what to do with it. So I used to cut in half so that it would sink. So that was total ignorance, and that was a few years ago. And so I tried to change the way I did things. I dedicate myself, and have done for the past 10 years, to protecting oceans. And I navigate a great deal and sail, and I crossed with an association I'm ambassador for that's called Waste and Water. They're Swiss. It's a Swiss team. I learned a great deal. I sailed at medium speed. We have a solar-powered boat that doesn't go very fast. And so I was able to look around me, which is very important. And I realized that after having crossed almost all the Aegean and Antarctic and the Northwestern Passage, and that the problem was actually very serious, and that the ocean was so vast that in reality we didn't see that much waste floating on the sea, and it's really the invisible element that is the problem. And I realized this, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's utopic. It's utopia. I apologize, but I think it's utopia to want to clean the seas. And the problem isn't something we need to look at back to front. We need to start right from the beginning and avoid the plastic waste arrives in the oceans. And so we need to work upstream. And this is where the governments are very important, because there are many things to do. And first of all, we need to get the laws to be abided by. Very recently, I was in Africa. I work a great deal with on an association in Lake Victoria and the Indian Ocean, and I realized that in Uganda and Tanzania, plastic bags are forbidden, but we get them everywhere on the markets because the laws are not applied. And what happens in Africa is also happening in our country. So governments need to get these laws to be applied. And and apart from this, plastic bags that are used once, one use, they're a real problem. We can't just get rid of them in 10, 15 years. We need to get rid of them now. That's important. Other thing, and I'm getting a bit cross about this because I really am very fired up and shocked by this. The other aspect is fighting our own waste and managing our own waste. Waste is a huge issue. Look at what happened recently in Marseille. That's the way things are all the time. Our waste, mostly, there are mafia organizations that send them to developing countries that have nothing to process them. And in Africa at the moment is completely affected by our own waste. It's disastrous. It's a scandal. It's terrible. And governments need to deal with this so we avoid this type of disastrous situation. We also need to work with industrialists. It's unheard of to avoid plastics, but we need to produce less and in a different way. And this is something that's very important. It's down to governments to work on this issue. And then the third aspect, and this is something that I'm very involved in because I think it's very important, is educating, training. My problem with plastics and bottles was ignorance. I didn't know that waste turned into microplastics, and I didn't know that plastic sank. I ignored this. So I believe that educating is important. Children need to be trained, educated. We've started doing that, but they need to be involved even more. So governments need to, or ought to, force people in classes, in primary school at least, every week, to have at least 1 hour dedicated to teaching them about protecting the environment. That's it, really. And I think that these are many aspects, and I'm really happy to be able to take the floor because I think that many people are going to listen to this. It's very important. I'm going to leave the floor to my colleague after that, but I just really wanted to say that in any case, it's obvious to me that for the planet to be in good health, the ocean also has to be in good health, which is absolutely not the case. We really need or should take things in hand and work on the subject. And I'm handing the floor to my dear friend now. Thank you, Eric. for your passion, for your belief, and Patrick, the seventh continent, with whom I have a great deal of links. Yes, we're going to save time. Eric said everything, really. We're in a really difficult situation. The ocean is filling up with plastics. I want to just insist on one aspect. During the summit, we're talking a great deal about the ocean and about this major spread of water around the planet. But if we were to empty the whole ocean and put it next to the Earth, it would be a ball that would be 1,000 kilometers in diameter, and this little ball is life, and we're filling it with plastics. That's disastrous, isn't it? It's sort of like having skin on an apple. Once you've peeled the apple, there's still a major quantity underneath, and this little ball only represents 0.023% of the mass of the Earth, and that's where the disaster is. So it's obvious. Otherwise, it's just going to be redundant and repeat what Eric said. But waste is not macro waste. The major problem in seas is invisible population. It's something that you don't see. I navigate in accumulation zones. When I go to do my expeditions, I stop and I spend some time in areas where this waste accumulates in the Pacific and North Atlantic. And twice I've been happy to have meteorological conditions that have been exceptional, with a flat sea like a lake. And this is really terrible, because you see all of the micro particles coming up to the surface, and you realize the devastation in the oceans. But as soon as there are waves, everything disappears. You can go through these areas without seeing anything. There aren't, islands of waste. Thank you, Patrick. I wanted to add something to add to what Isabelle and Olivier said earlier on. I agree with them. What is important also is solidarity between all of the different NGOs, organizations that actually are working towards the same purpose and often do not know each other or don't work together. Thank you very much. Now I've made a commitment with Isabelle to create links, and I'm too fearful of her to not stick to my commitment. Seventh continent, thank you very much. And with the laboratories, the laboratories discovered that plastics could be even super nano particles, 36,000 times smaller than a hair. And we don't even know what that does to plankton. And now I'm calling on a subject that is just an example. I'm calling what we are doing to protect the oceans. Alexandre, Charlie, and Alan. I apologize, I'm timekeeper.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you so much for allowing us to talk in the name of the skippers of IMOCA. In 2009, I won the Maxi Transatlantic on a boat called Jourdain. We were close to the coastline in England, and I was shocked by the amount of plastics waste that I could see in the water, so I decided to set up Format and Planet Association. I became the first navigator on an IMOCA boat, a single hull of 60 feet. It was quite difficult to collaborate with scientists at the time. We found it difficult to work together and to organize meetings and such. And that was over 10 years ago. But now I'm very, very proud, because yesterday we inaugurated the Odyssey project. Times have changed. Now we talk, we work together. IMOCA, Ocean Race, Vendée Globe. We get and obtain data about the water and the oceans for the scientists who are watching the ocean. It's data to do with temperature, units, acidification of the ocean, plastics. We work with IOC, UNESCO, Ocean Hubs, the CNES, different organizations internationally, and there is a true cooperation. Now, why? When seafarers who go into the ocean, Indian Ocean and Pacific, why are we important players for scientists? Well, because there is no data in these lands that are totally deserted. There are no human beings living there, but there is an amazing amount of life and people who are able to gather data. And that's why our action today, where we cooperate, all of the navigators who have navigated in the Great South know that it's essential for science. And so we do need financial means and human resources. And once again, we need cooperation. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Alexia. You're all very convinced. It's very, very interesting. Charlie now. Okay, very quickly because we're late. I wanted to say, well, that the ocean for sailors is something that we're linked to the ocean. We have fantastic teams today within IMOCA with great talents, with means, and it's our role to work and help and for things to improve. The IMOCA class was a precursor, a trailblazer. And some of the innovations of core are pushed forward by this class. For example, we're going to be building new ships, new boats, and of course, we work on that as well. There's now a set of rules in construction that are compulsory on building, on mobility, communication, energy, all of the aspects linked to communication. And we had already developed with Apilia a partial list of specifications on the first boat, ACV, and that was something that brought positive aspects to the building of the vessels. And there are other actions also that are carried out and run by IMOCA. All of the use of biosourced materials, for example, that is very good because it removes the gauge weights and all sorts of things. It's quite technical, but it helps us to move us forward. And then, as Eric was saying earlier on, as far as I'm concerned, teaching training is something that is essential. Teaching, training young people, raising awareness among these young populations is something that we do and that we deal with in the Abacus program. That's a program that is aimed at younger people. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Fantastic. And now we're going to listen to Alan.
Bonjour.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Alors, moi j'ai bientôt 30 ans.
I'll be 30 soon. I'm a Swiss IMOCA class navigator. I've been on the water since I was 2. I lived on a boat. I've seen many things in different countries. I was lucky to live in Venezuela, South America, where on the buses at the time, on the windows of the buses, it says, "Please don't throw your waste out on the roadside." That was not very long ago. I've been 3 times around the world, twice in IMOCA. I've seen climate change, and with my eyes, I've seen things I didn't see in the previous years, especially in the Atlantic. It's our playing field. You have the alisiers that no longer exist, and also the sargass, the algae that can be in major patches or small patches. They can be floating islands that are the size of the room here. There are areas. Before we used to find them in the Bahamas. During the last Vendée Globe, I saw them right to the north of the Azores. So the currents have changed, temperatures have changed in the oceans, and I'm also a young dad. And what I'm trying to say today is that I feel embarrassed about what's happening on the planet. And do you want to show your children this deregulation of the planet and show them that you've done nothing, or do you want to show them that you have done something to improve the world for when they're older? Thank you very much. Thank you, Alan, for your testimonial. We're there really to try to be slightly less pessimistic, and I would like to now call you for a topic that's slightly less linked to climate change, and that's the topic of solidarity among human beings faced with the oceans. And I'm going to ask Eric Bellion and François Gabart to come up here on stage. And I think Yannick Besteven has COVID, or was tested positive to COVID since this morning, so he's not here. So he will be represented by his 2 comrades, Eric Bellion and François Gabart.
Very quickly, Francis, I think you're extraordinary in an event for the ocean to have succeeded in getting together so many sailors. It's extraordinary. I think there's no race, there's no record that's been able to do that in the past. When I see all of these navigators, a number of those that have saved other sailors, how many lives have been saved? It's pretty extraordinary. It's real, the solidarity of skippers with each other is just incredible. And unfortunately, you all know today that in the ocean there are people that die. I'm thinking about in the Mediterranean, but there are in other areas as well of the world. We're trying with our associations that are acting in respect to this. François is the sponsor of SOS Mediterranean. And we as navigators have to provide support to the government and civil society. And this is defended by the civil society so that we can continue to associate something that's very positive with the ocean and not people dying and trying to save lives, that's all.
Merci, François.
Thank you, François.
C'est simple et fort.
It's simple and it's strong.
Toi qui es un vieux complice, tu vas me donner une seconde.
Eric, you're an old accomplice. I know that that's the reason I thought of Yannick de Pesseven, because immediately after arriving, after his last victory, is the first press conference, he started talking about solidarity and what's going on in the Mediterranean and so forth. So I think it's a very strong symbol, and it was very important for those who are fighting for that. Eric, you have your own combat. What's that? Well, the sea is an area of peace and solidarity. It's been 20 years now that I'm putting together adventures on the sea and to try to understand what's going on between men and women. And the sea, for me, is a laboratory. You can't cheat. You have to be confronted with confidence. So there's no angelical ideas or, you have to be a team. You have to be a crew. And if you're talking about ecology or preserving the common good, this question is indissociable with the way in which you share it. And that's where I want to be vigilant as a sailor. I know what a crew is, and you can't have a consensus about that if there's no equity. And one of my first memories during a trip is on the Green Cape. And a fisherman there said that resources had gone down because there were Russian fishermen who bought all of the licenses in that area. And I was so angry because if we came with our and we take over the resources, and if we get out of, if you just look at protection of the environment without thinking about the people that live from the sea, it won't work. So if you're thinking about that combat, don't forget the human side. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to tell you what Eric has been doing for 20 years because I've talked about it with him every step of the way. And Français has organized that.
Donc maintenant, alors,
now,
que je me trompe pas, je vais demander à Jimmy.
I'm going to ask Jimmy Pahun to come up and talk to us.
Avec toute la brièveté que peut mettre un
as briefly as a parliamentarian can do, about his convictions about the BBLG and the real requirement to lead this fight. He's in the parliament in Paris to push the results. Thank you, Francis. I wanted, first of all, to thank you all for being here this evening and thank the organizers of this international summit. It's the first time there's one dedicated to the ocean, and thanks to Francis and all the energy you put into organizing this session. 2 or 3 things to say. There are 17 Sustainable Development Objectives by the UN. The sea is number 14. You remember what number that was and what race it was, number 14? It was Tabarly. I think that's kind of a nice parallel. And I'd like to thank the President, Peter Thompson. In Kersauson, in the 5% that I do, of my time that I devote, you work in Parliament on several things. We work on BBNG. Everybody has to explain what that is. Above and beyond the 200,000, the sea has no jurisdiction. And so we need to find a jurisdiction beyond those 200 nautical miles. It's what we call BBNG. And in the month of March, this is the last round of negotiations, which is going to happen. And we need to hold to it. We ask all ministers of all countries to be able to go there. And the second thing we talked about in law, in the seventh continent, and of plastic. Here again, we've made some resolutions so that there be an international treaty on plastic. We know it needs to be done. We need the confirmation, but we need to recycle them and only have recycled plastic, expanded polystyrene and so forth. We need to put an end to that. And the third thing is just a kind of talking about French shipping and for maritime transport of an international nature. We know that maritime transport is it's the equivalent of the country of Japan in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. We need to congratulate French shippers that are doing their transformation. They want to have zero carbon footprint in 2030, 24% less. So the French fleet has reached those objectives already because you need 20-25%, and a ship like the new Brittany Ferry ship is running on gas. And the last message to the shippers is that you've got the cream of Vedic intelligence. So let's use the wind to move our ships and exchange, talk it over. We have the best architects this morning in the forum, and we're talking about performance and so forth. We have everything we need. And thanks, Francis, for that wonderful meeting.
Jimmy, merci.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Notre navigateur au Parlement.
He's our sailor in the Parliament.
Parce qu'il faut aussi parler de
And we need to talk about oneself and to call oneself into question. So to talk about
Roland, Jourdain et James Neville.
Roland and James Neville. We can do it in English.
So
let's go for that.
James Neville est commodore du Rourke, Royal Ocean Racing Club.
He's the commander of the York, the Royal Racing Club, and he's a big partner of the NCL. There's a lot of experience in...
Pour nos amis sans expérience maritime, Commodore, ça veut dire que c'est le boss.
And Commodore means he's the boss.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to talk today, and thank you, Francis and Anne, for organising such an amazing session. At the Royal Ocean Racing Club, we organise offshore races. Some of them are Transocean, and some of them are more coastal races. The most famous race, maybe the preeminent offshore race in the world, is the Fastnet race that we organise. That finished in Cherbourg last year. So we rely on the oceans for our sport, and we are very much aware of the importance of the oceans as a critical resource for the world and the need to increase the care we take for the oceans. We advertise our sport as being a green sport powered by the wind, when we know the reality is that we also have a number of significant environmental impacts in the way we go about things, specifically and most importantly for the most competitive teams. And I think it's good to note that some of those big sports teams, the bigger sailing teams, are organising some initiatives to reduce our environmental impact. And good examples are the introduction of a hydrogen-powered chase boat, the introduction now of battery-powered engines to replace the diesel engines. Yes, they have a diesel backup, but we've reduced the impact there, and considerable efforts going in to reduce the materials, change the materials that we're using to use more sustainable materials, both for our hulls and for our sails. The frustration is that these petroleum compounds are so flipping efficient, and they're very hard to replace in the activities that we have. But our job, I think, is to encourage these sports teams to develop these leading initiatives and to see those initiatives come through into the rest of the sport. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. I think it was very, very clear. Thank you very much. Roland?
Bonsoir tout le monde. Alors nous, on est tous partis en mer pour diverses raisons. On est partis pour se mesurer à nous-mêmes.
We are there to measure ourselves and to, when you're in a race, we're also there to win. We're here to measure yourself against the elements. We've all learned at the sea that it serves no purpose to be against something. You have to be with nature because it's stronger than we are. It's a sport, but it's not like a sport like any other. Our sport is a continuity in the history, the maritime history. from the night of times, sailors were always looking for money. And kings and governors, the kings wanted to go faster and further to find other sources of wealth. And we are a product of the generation of leisure. And it's made it possible to have incredible racing machines in terms of speed. We had some incredible things in performance, which made it possible to have a collective intelligence of our environment that's extremely useful for development of the sail-based maritime transport. So we spent a lot of time being jealous of hydrodynamics or dolphin or the albatross wing and so forth. But there's one thing we forgot in this business is in that imitation, it has a cost for the planet, and we hadn't thought of that. So we have no more choice. Now we know that the performance of the future will be the environmental performance. So the financial story this is going to be a priority in finance. It's there. So we have to adapt, and that's a good thing. It's a sport not like no other, but we have no choice. We have to be in those criteria, the new performance criteria. We also know that we know how to get back to the essential and to get rid of the superficial. We have to do the same thing on land. We do it on sea. From the design of ships and the organization of our projects, we can put everything on the table new. The techniques and materials, you know my love for the biomaterials, and these things will... We have our catamaran with a hectare of sail. But we have to succeed in this transformation. But technology is of no use if we don't change the way we're using it and our behavior. So I think there's only one thing to be done, is to work all together, everything we've learned at the sea, to place it at the service of the environment. We're lucky because the public is ready. And so there's no more sailors, there's no more earth people, we're all human beings.
Merci. Bilou.
Thank you, Bilou.
Merci, Monsieur Bilou. Bon, dernière intervention.
The last speech for the first part.
Chacun a 3 minutes. Après, on passe à...
They have 2 minutes now.
J'appelle sur le thème de l'innovation.
We're going to talk about innovation to better protect the ocean. Charlie Enright.
Yves Parlier.
Yves Parlier.
Voilà. Qui a déjà parlé hier.
Who spoke yesterday, I think.
Et Lionel Péan.
Lionel Péan.
Bonjour, bonsoir, in anglais. My name is Charlie Enright, and I am the skipper of the 11th Hour Racing Team. We are based in Newport, Rhode Island, and we're one of the few Anglo-Saxon teams that has been welcomed into this wonderful world of French offshore sailing. Thank you not only for the privilege of being welcomed in, but for the privilege of speaking here tonight. Not one person alone, not one government, not one organization can protect our oceans on their own. It's only through collaboration that we can make the radical changes that are required for positive ocean health. Empowered by our sponsor, 11th Hour Racing, our mission as a team is to build a high-performance offshore outfit with sustainability at the core of all operations. And that is what we have lived day in and day out for the last 18 months as we built our new Amaka 60 Malama. We've worked with industry leaders here in Brittany, such as Mayor Concept, Guillaume Verdier and his team, and CDK Technologies, in order to measure every aspect that's gone into the build of our boat, from the raw materials to the energy and water consumption to the investment in the local economy. Our life cycle analysis has given us a precise baseline on the impact of building a performance yacht right here in Brittany. By measuring what goes into the build, it has allowed us to consider how to reduce our impact, from the use of biomaterials such as flax and bioresins to the incorporation of biomimicry. We have continuously considered what is the new normal when it comes to building performance boats. Only by measuring can we manage our impact. We've shared our findings openly and transparently in our design and build report, allowing all those who are building boats now to have access to our data. Across the marine industry, we have a lot of work to do. We have to reduce our footprint by 50% by the year 2030 to align with the United Nations framework and the Paris Agreement. We've celebrated and chased performance over sustainable responsibility for the environment and for its people. The footprint to build a new Imoca 60 is 550 tons of CO2 emitted, which is the equivalent of driving an automobile 2.2 million miles or 55 times around the equator. We're going ever faster on the water, but in the wrong direction for the ocean. Our natural role as leaders and public ambassadors for the ocean requires a different path. Working closely with the Imoca class, other organizers, we've made a number of recommendations that will see changes in the class rules for the upcoming editions of the Vendée Globe and the Ocean Race. The sustainability-focused rules reward sustainable innovation, favoring the use of biosourced materials, green sails, and promote life cycle analyses. We need our sponsors and our partners to work with us to support this new normal, committing to longer-term projects that allow teams the time to research, develop, and test these alternative materials. We as sailors have the privilege of witnessing the ocean in all of its awesome glory, whether it's becalmed in the doldrums or in the rage of the Southern Ocean. However, to continue to stand out as a sport, we must work together to radically change the way that we are doing business. Let us be ambassadors for the ocean that carries us and do everything we can to keep it healthy, allowing us to continue to do the jobs that we love to do. Thank you.
I will ask that you leave your text to us, okay? Okay, now Yves. Yeah.
Bonsoir à tous. Je suis
Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here
One Ocean Summit.
in the One Ocean Summit. I'm so happy
Sommet international.
that there's an international summit and to find myself and with friends who do these races on the high seas, and it's so important. We are all on this planet together, and more than 2/3 of our planet is the ocean. So we've devoted everything to the sea, and I believe today it's so important to take decisions to cease pollution and all of the degradation that brings about. In a certain sense, sailors existed for some 200,000 years. And 500 years ago, or in 30 years ago, there was Christopher Bartholomew and Magellan made our planet a small sphere where all men had a clear idea that it was round. So in the space of 100 years, we've forgotten sailing. Oil sort of swept that under the rug. So, what's 100 years in an Earth that's been around for, billions of years? It's a small mistake. So I can say that for me, what we're doing today in racing is important, because this know-how that we lost from sailing in the great epoch of the three-masted schooners. Today, you're making progress. When I started, I went twice as slow as a cargo ship, and I stopped. We were going twice as fast, and now we're going 3 times as fast. So this know-how, we need to teach it to professional sailors, those who have been using oil up to now, so that they can reuse the wind, which is an absolutely incredible energy. We know that a big ship goes faster than a small ship. So we have a 400-meter ship. This is not going to be a problem to get it to work at 20 knots just with the wind. So we need to think about it. And with Beyond the Sea, we started with the idea that Kai could help ships to save fuel and to pollute less. And the kite has a great advantage, because it's easy to retrofit it to motorized ships. It doesn't take much room on the bridge, so we have developed the sea kite solution, which we're trying to develop, but it's just a small part of the problem. But everybody needs to bring their stone to the edifice. So that's our stone. And I feel really in solidarity with you. And I accept your proposal to stay in contact to help move forward the cause of the ocean and the planet. The only sailboat we have in the universe is this planet. Thank you, Yves, the kite man. Lionel? I prepared a little text. You lose your words when you get older. We're going to talk about the sea and management of the coastline. It's a planetary question for the preservation of the environment and adaptation to the changes in use, and also for the issues of climate and global warming. That's why I wanted to commit to the management of the coastline for an innovative approach and ecological of mooring areas. The coastline has a lot of pressure with the increase in population and the increase in the number of boats. There's more than 30 million boats on the planet. And for leisure boats, there's they're building 300,000 a year, which is likely. And this wild mooring produces irreversible damage on areas in coral. And there can be, and this is a cost overrun for the community when this type of usage is made. So it's necessary to have dedicated spaces. And the questions of mooring is to secure usage and to preserve sea bottoms and our heritage. On my end, I've created and tested and patented a mooring solution which is a sliding structure with many qualities in actual application, which doesn't generate any impact on fauna and flora, and which is positioned facing the wind, which limits the flapping and clapping without any butt effect. You can monitor 5 dimensions, and it makes it possible to deal with aquaculture and so forth in the water column. So it's thanks to an independent mooring system, we have technical platforms which in the future may serve as diving centers in Saudi Arabia and other things. With our innovative products, we can accompany the implementation of organized mooring areas so that we can optimize space with shared facilities. So this limits the radius of avoidance, and for economic reasons, that's good. The concentration of the onboard system makes it possible to manage leisure boaters' services, recycling used water, water runoffs, wastewater, and managing the control of traffic and the security aspects, safety aspects. So to have a lower carbon footprint in recycling of materials, we subcontract the manufacturing of the elements in the product, so you can work on the circular economy by injecting in the coastline commerce the transfer of technology such as cost limiting linked to transport. I know that it'll take time. It's going to require education, but my activity is for future generations, and all sailors need to work together to change fundamentally the mentalities involved so that all users of the ocean and sailors and landlubbers, all of us without exception, are included in the value chain and need to contribute to maintain the biodiversity and the good health of our oceans, which is the heritage of humanity.
Merci. Merci Lionel.
Thank you, Lionel.
un peu plus tard que...
This brings to conclusion the first part. I'd like to reassure you, as I was saying earlier, I'd say we're going to do the group that Isabelle was talking about, Isabelle Autissier, and everything's going to be circularized so that we can talk about it amongst ourselves to see what the important ideas are there so that we can be effective about all of the content of the speeches we've been hearing in these declarations. So we don't want it to stay there. Now, we're going to hand over to the sailors present, and they're going to say what they want to say, a minute each to talk where they want to intervene, and another minute to make a recommendation or complain about something. I think let's call it a recommendation. And I want to talk about the second cycle by asking Marc Guillemot to come to the fore.
Ne cherchez pas d'ordre, c'est totalement aléatoire.
This is not in any particular order.
Bonsoir.
Hello.
Je vais essayer de faire court. Voilà.
I'm going to try to keep it short.
Comment? Plus court.
Somebody said keep it shorter. During my career as a sailor, I had the privilege of sailing around all the oceans in the world. All of this time spent sailing helped me to think about some sensitive issues which I wanted to apply myself to, such as lost containers lost at sea, or energy sources. Today, I want to talk only about energy, to stay in that time frame. When you're racing or on a cruise, the main concern aboard a sailboat is that they're much more energy consuming. And you want it to be as low carbon as possible, or even 100% no carbon. One of the solutions has its source in light and sun. By creating AOL with a group of engineers and several other people. AOL means the light of the sun. So we're thinking of a sun sail, which is a photovoltaic. It was OPVA. So these are lightweight, semi-transparent, and very resistant. So it's by a very large number, you can provide enough energy to do without any polluting source of energy, contrary to other solar cells that have an unfavorable carbon calculation. OPVs are organic cells and non-polluting. We've tested them on a trimaran in the last Jacques Vabre race, and the results that we obtained, that we measured, and that we logged have encouraged us to move forward a step more. We're going to be equipping an MG5 catamaran that I was the skipper of in the next race, and a solar sun will be serving 100% of the energy necessary during the whole race. I hope I'll be able to tell you more about that when it's over. And with AOL, and this is a new startup, we're planning on proposing these solar sails encapsulated in sails, in the actual fabric. We're going to be proposing them to cargo ships, because that's another important topic. Many people talked about changes in marine and commercial ships. We also know there are a lot of applications possible for this type of technology. And we're going to be proposing these to shippers and all of the new projects, and there are quite a few lined up. I know that Yves talked about it earlier, but there are many other ones as well. And we know that with the technology that we've implemented, we can offer this type of solution on land. It could be for tents, it could be in the air as well, it could be dirigibles, even if it's not our activity today, but we certainly can work on that. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, but come and see me afterwards, I'll be around.
Bien, je vais demander à Damien Grimont.
I'm going to ask Damien Grimont to come to the fore.
Donner son coup de gueule ou son cri du cœur ou son...
bonjour à tous.
Good evening to everyone. Apparently, astronauts, when they go up into space, they can see the planet, and they have an emotional shock when this happens that makes them fight to safeguard and save the planet. And I think that we as sailors have this privilege that we live moments on the water that are intense, that are close to nature. We relearn how to be simple and sleep and eat and watch and be amazed. And I think that today we have this awareness and understanding of what we might call the finitude, or the end of the planet. And as sailors, we have a role to play. And because we have an emotion, this is a real catalyst for action. And I'm always amazed to see how all of you have or carry major innovations with applications all over the place. And I know it's not the topic today, but we work with Francis and François as an ambassador on a major event that will work on special areas and that will accelerate all of your innovations and be applicable in 2023 during an European nautical event. Now, as a man, the way in which I wish to change things, I'm thinking a great deal about the way in which we really could change our society. Something I don't understand, and this is more down to something that makes sense. I don't know how we have resources that are finite and how we can feel that they don't have a cost. I think at some point we're going to have to understand that the planet is finite and that the cost has to be capitalized on or used or developed, and we need to set something up to enable us to repair and safeguard what exists. So the new economy has to change what companies are doing. We need to introduce this idea that we're in a finite world. And the last thing comes back to what Eric was saying, and this is a very sort of hands-on approach. It's through training, educating, and that changes behaviors. And I believe that today, just as an example, because we need to be realistic, and I think that all children should read Jean Govissy's cartoon strip. It's the world with no end. It explains how the planet is finite and how it works. It was very shocking for me to read this cartoon strip, and I think that we still need to carry on being amazed. Go and watch La Panthère des Neiges, the snow panther. It's what you see on the Atlantic when there's no one left, and you have this amazing emotion whilst looking at the planet. But there are people out there. They're moving. They have solutions, and so I want to watch and follow certain people who make films such as Tomorrow, and who want to safeguard and save what exists. I think we need to stop talking about the environment and ecology just from a political point of view. I believe that the environment has to happen at school, same as maths. It has to be taught, same as foreign languages. It's a living subject, same way as the oceans are living and alive. Thank you. Many ideas we can work on, and this idea of a bank, it's a very interesting idea.
We are lucky to have with us Mike Golding. It's a big privilege to have you here. So would you be kind enough to come and join here? Et je vais demander ensuite à Maud Fontenoy d'approcher.
I'm then going to ask Maud Fontenoy to come as well.
I wanted to say that the big issue for me is the existential threat of climate change and biodiversity. Sometimes we get muddled up about the issues that we're dealing with and that we're addressing, and it's really important for us as sailors to consider that and look at the individual project, the individual thing that we're pushing for, and make sure that it's towards that existential threat of climate change and biodiversity. These are the two things which are going very slowly, and thus they're kind of creeping up on us, but it's a real threat. I think it's vital that certain actions that happen within a MOCA, but in fairness, I think a MOCA probably represents a very tiny part of the climate change problem. The 11th hour report on the building of the 11th hour boat was just extraordinary. It tells you how much work we've got to do, and the MOCA and Class 40 need to take some radical actions to get themselves on track. But really our part as sailors, what we do as sailors, is we tell the public, the people, the 99% of people who never see the ocean, who never go out on the ocean, we're the ones that can communicate to the public what's happening out on our oceans and the importance of them. I think it was Eric Tabley said something along the lines of the sea is the thing behind you when you're looking up the beach. And I think really the majority of the public, and that's the big problem. And because we operate in a democracy, we need to make sure that we alert the public to the problems of the oceans. And sailors are well equipped to do that and do it extremely well. And the new generation of sailors with social media and all the tools at their fingertips are able to do that so much better than I think the older generation were able to do with the limited resources we had available to us. So I see signs of positivity. I mean, the fact that this group has been brought together is incredible. It's encouraging to see Jimmy as a politician in your parliament. I'd be very encouraged if we had anyone like that with us. But all these things are putting pressure, but let's keep focus on the existential threat of climate change and biodiversity. These are the two things that if you don't get that right over the next 10 years, all the rest of it won't matter. Saving the whales, it won't matter because they'll be gone for other reasons. You know, you have to pick your targets. And for me, I believe sailors and pro sailors should be pushing to assist that particular issue. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. Apart from the pleasure of having such a great British sailor referring to a French sailor, and in that case, more specifically, Eric Tabarly. Such a pleasure. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, Maud, please. Would you be kind enough? Bienvenue, Maud.
Je suis navrée, je suis la seule en talons.
I apologize, I'm the only one wearing heels. Hello, good evening to everyone.
Je pense qu'on est tous ici convaincus du fait.
I think we're all convinced here that this summit is a very good event and that we're very proud to take part in it. So thank you very much for making this call to sailors, because every day I realize that it's the Kersauson, the Tabarly, and major names of sailors that people talk about in the street. And for French people, and I think for the rest of the world, you, seafarers, sailors, you embody this huge space with a freedom and possible solutions, and the ocean that I hold dearly. For me, the emergency is also talking about something positive. So the ocean is a solution, and it's to show how, through being egotistical, that we should preserve the oceans, because it's linked to medicine and climate and water and food. And if we talk about these positive aspects, and I notice this, and this is why we have published this little booklet. I'm an ambassador with the National Ministry for Seas, and we're going to broadcast this through our counterparts in Europe, and it's to bring knowledge and enthusiasm that we've published this booklet, to give them hope, and this will go through scientific evidence and emergency, but also through the fact that they are essential, these elements essential for our future, and that many aspects of the ocean are fascinating. So we need all of you to relay or pass on the message, so that people want to get up in the morning and the children want to get up in the morning and discover this wonderful environment, the sea. Thank you. Thank you, Maud. And you have been concerned for many, many years of this educational aspect. You developed many programs on this, and you were a trailblazer in this aspect. I would now like to ask Yvan Bourgnon to come up and talk to us. Thank you.
Bonjour à tous.
Good evening. I'm delighted to be with you this evening, and I'd like to thank you for being here. Some of the sailors here are already ambassadors, but I think that you could even be spokespeople so that more skippers, more sailors, more navigators can work with NGOs. It's very important to set your name and give time and to get involved for a small amount of your time in NGOs. It's really important. We already have a few of you, and the results that we've seen have been actually fantastic. To resolve the problem of pollution in the oceans, it's quite straightforward. You need scientists. They are undeniable today. You need governance, and this is why we are meeting here today, to try to find governance within the context of these oceans. And the third aspect is moving and acting. And acting today, we're lucky today. We have NGOs in France. We're very good at NGOs in France that are very efficient on dealing with the issues of the oceans, and they really do have the solutions to advise politicians, to educate and train and raise awareness. And yes, Eric, this is the main priority. You need to raise awareness and educate, and they also have the tools to move into action and go for it. But what's happening today? Well, the NGOs in France represents 200 million euro market for all of the French NGOs for sustainable development. That's a drop in the ocean. They have no way of moving into action and acting. For ocean cleaners, we have 30 people, 2,000 voluntary workers, and we suggest that we raise awareness and educate and train, not just in Europe, but all over the world, and more specifically in Southeast Asia for this question of plastics. We want to take on board scientists, 10 or so per boat, because knowledge about microparticles, particulates of plastic is important in the oceans. We don't have that much knowledge about the microparticles coming into the rivers, and then move into action and act. I don't agree with you, Eric. We need to be able to collect this plastic weight. What do the scientists say? They say that 12,000 tons of plastics go into the oceans every year, but there'll be 3 times more in 2060, and even 8 times more in 2100. What do? You leave the things, leave them in the ocean, such as in Marseille with the waste, or you go and gather the waste? I'm just saying that we have 2,000 small 9-meter boats in the water and 20 boats of 60 meters in the water, and you can collect 75% of this plastics waste now, tomorrow, straight away. And we know that there are 100 rivers, scientists say this, that send 75% of this plastic into the ocean. So you can go to the entrance of the rivers and collect the plastic, and this plastic ends up down the end of the river, and they're not microparticles yet. We don't want them to end up in the birds and mixed up with the fauna and flora. And so we want to capture all this plastic before they go into the oceans from the rivers. That's what I suggest. Thank you very much. And within this platform that we're going to develop, it suggests, or we are going to have very vivid discussions, and since we all have the same target, we're going to end up with solutions that are common to all of us. I'm going to ask Lalou-Querol to come and talk to us.
J'ai juste un petit texte parce que pour tenir dans les 2 minutes, c'est pas toujours simple.
I have just a small
J'ai préparé un petit texte
speech
extrêmement pragmatique en fait.
or a small sort of presentation in 2 minutes. Very practical, actually. Good evening to all. I'm going to talk on an important topic, the environmental impact linked to the practice of nautical sports. We produce, from an industrial point of view, all sorts of products, polyester, epoxy, since the beginning of the 1970s. In 2020, it's 1.0141 million units produced in France. That's from small boats to yachting boats. We have a unit mass at the end of life with hulls and bridges, or the deck with that. So these materials are non-recyclable. These units at the end of their life, when they are not dropped in a creek or in a port, are mostly buried and not really recycled or not recyclable. In general, the race, high sea race, needs high-speed boats, and this means different types of hulls. But we racers are not yet inclined to go backwards in terms of the performance of our racing boats at sea, but we can have an alternative to these non-recyclable composite materials when they are used with thermo-hardening resins. We tested a thermoplastic resin developed in France by carrying out developing a first boat that was fully recyclable, 100% recyclable, with 30% from recycled products, glass fiber and resins, and the weight was equivalent to an epoxy hull. It dropped 50% of our carbon emission and in the raw materials that were then able to, the end of life of the boat will mean that all of the materials that have been used in the building of the ship will be from 2025 able to be recycled. So the fibers, the resins, and the PET will not be recyclable. The hull, developed with plant-based materials, will mean that there will be a virtuous cycle that will ensure the reuse of the materials whilst limiting the use of fossil fuels. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. On peut avoir votre texte? You can leave it to us. I would like to congratulate the translator and thank her. I think it was quite challenging. But you did it, apparently. I could look at you. OK. Maintenant, je voudrais appeler Capucine Tronchet.
I'd like to call Capucine Tronchet, please, now.
Bonsoir.
Good evening. So I am a dreamer, but I'm wondering if we could ask our directors to include the ocean or the living in all the decisions they make, so that we can think about all of this globally before putting pesticides on bananas in Martinique that are going to damage everything, water, human beings, everything, before sinking boats offshore. We should think about it, take responsibility, and put what is essential when we go out to sea, some good sense in all of the decisions that are made. I'd also like to testify to one aspect. I'm moving forward slowly on a sort of DIY boat. It makes people smile, but this sort of sobriety and the means used and this me sailing forward near the living beings has made me happy, never happier than I have before. I feel so happy with very little, and I'm not against technology. I'm delighted to have an emergency kit or boat, but I don't think we need that much. And the way in which we work in this way and sail in this way is also possible on land. And sometimes we talk about performance. Well, no, I don't agree, because I think that when we get rid of many things, we have less, and so we're more efficient because we spread ourselves less thin on the ground, and we come back to something that calls for good sense, being sensible, and then we look at the stars and we look at the state of the sea and we learn what clouds can tell us, and we learn how to do it again. We're able to do it, and so it's good to be aided by everything, but we shouldn't be just resting on this technology. I don't know if what I'm saying is legitimate, but if I can testify to this, maybe it can encourage others to think of this. I think encourage more simplicity and more sobriety in what we use, and using less in what we do. Whether you are politicians or whoever you are, please respect the living, the ocean, and let's ensure solidarity to everything that lives around us, with us. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, Capucine,
de cette sincérité
for being so open in what you say to us.
Arthur Le Vaillant.
Arthur Le Vaillant, you now have the floor. Now, before everyone falls asleep, I'm going to talk about something we hold very dearly, and that's money. Well, we use a great deal of money for sporting performance to go faster, ever faster. We put little money or not very intelligence in trying to reduce our impact. We talk about a lot about freedom or liberty, but it only really exists unless it's forced. I carry out a sport that's wonderful. It uses wind to move. We're all there trying to get more speed and be faster and have more performance, but speed actually costs. It costs, and we need to do everything we can to try to stick it within the limits of the planet. And in order to ensure and do this, we need to be restricted, and this means that we can set out questions, and it encourages engineers, architects and designers to think differently. And it's work that we've tried to achieve with a movement with a whole load of seafarers here. It's called La Vague, the wave, and please join our association. It's taking on quite a momentum, and today I hear a lot of people saying that we need to train young people, train children and the new generation, but we need to train the generation that's in power today, that's ordering our sporting projects and running our government and running major companies, because very few of us really aware of the limits of the planet, and we don't understand the fact that we have an impact that's very strong on the environment and on biodiversity. François Sarano is just here, and Françoise Gale, I've been listening to her for many years, and let's put the scientific discussion at the center of things. And I don't know how to say this, but let's try to be there to listen as much as we can to what's surrounding us. And so speed does have a cost. Let's learn to slow down and do things differently. This is a model that we need to bear far more forward in when we develop our sporting activities, and that's where the sponsoring should happen, and the money should be not just sports performance, but also performance to reduce our impact. Thank you.
François Sarano, je disais, il y avait des
François Sarano, I did say that we had divers, deep-sea divers, and swimmers and rowers. François is there. Would you like to say something? Okay, so please include us in your talks and discussions. I think these talks have been fantastic over the past day. We're there underwater, but we would like to be involved in your association and your discussions. Thank you. It's really enthralling. I've very much enjoyed what's going on. So you can see that the divers are associated, are linked. We're adding you to the list. We're adding you to the list of the signatories of the appeal. Eloise, François Saran, you need to add him to the list of signatories. And Emmanuel Bardou now?
C'est plutôt Guilin. Il n'y a pas les mêmes avantages, mais bon. Bien, 2 minutes. Hein.
You have a couple of minutes.
Bonjour à tous.
Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you to the organisers of the summit and the forum. And I'm delighted to take the floor, and I'll speak in the name of Emmanuel here, who works with me.
Alors, je suis plongeur.
I'm a diver, deep-sea diver, with François, with her.
C'est pour ça que j'ai fait la liaison.
That's why I linked the two. Now, before I sailed on the seas, because of course the ship is a fantastic way of exploring the greater depths. The oceans are mysterious, they're inspiring, deeply so, and the proof is that many children all over the world have played with teddies that symbolize the living beings that populate the depths of the ocean. They're fascinating and resilient, these oceans. They're rich of life that is eternally surprising. And when you sail on the surface of the oceans, you perceive their immensity. And when you dive in them, we can see that they host parallel worlds with their own specificities, species, landscapes, light that changes as you go deeper into the ocean. These worlds are interconnected. They are parallel, interconnected because there is a continuum within the ecosystems that make them up, and they have features that often cannot be seen through remote exploration systems such as
cœur des explorations.
Or systems, mechanical robots and systems that replace human beings. And if I'm talking about this here, is that beyond the first 30 meters where we traditionally study the aspects of the sea for technical, logistical and regulatory reasons, there exists close to us on all of the coastlines of the planet, and this is a surface area that is very, very massive. There's an unknown area that is, however, essential. It's 30 meters down, from 30 meters to 200 meters down. That's how it has been designed. It's called the mesophotic zone. It's a zone, it's a key area in where the ecosystems are under threat by human activity before they've even been studied and researched. And the exploration by deep-sea divers have only been made possible very recently through the development of techniques and knowledge. For several years, under the wall, the program works with the research center in France, CNRS, to study these deep ecosystems by linking up public, private partners, scientists, engineers, divers. And elsewhere in the world, other teams do the same thing, and often all of the immersion voyages we do enabled the discovery of new species, or they make us rethink knowledge that we thought was acquired. Let me give you an example. In French Polynesia, we finished in the last few years a program of EPOB that was carried out also by the CNRS and the Creole Research Institute, and they showed that the major coral diversity was not close to the surface, as we usually believed it did, but in the 40 to 60 meters zone. This zone is less impacted by whitening of the reef, and therefore it could bear hope if it is accounted for in the conservation policies. It's not anodyne, or it's not something that's not important. The coral reef represents 25% of the diversity in the ocean. So my message today is that it's essential to invest in science, to encourage and to develop research programs in oceanography in all of the depths of the sea, and more specifically in the mesophotic zone that is along the coasts all over the world. To best understand it and to understand the conditions of life and put in place the right measures to conserve, preserve and protect. So let's help scientists, and let's also help with education. It's something that is urgent and essential. Thank you.
Merci infiniment.
Thank you very much. This is even more important that last week I was reading that the IFREMER was saying that the coral reef was absolutely preserved and not just partially. So I don't know what to do. Our friend, I'm saying our friend before Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian, I hope that he won't hold it against us. Do you have a few minutes? We need 5 to 6 minutes just to finish, and then we can move on to the speech. Thank you very much. That's perfect. Now, given the problems that we have with links, I'm telling our friends Éric Brossier and Giancarlo Pelote that actually we will not be doing the video links, because we don't have the link. But we're going to listen to Gaston Morvan. We have a couple of minutes for Gaston.
No.
Is Gaston there? No. Well, that's surprising, because we really thought that he was going to be there. And then Richard Braces, who's going to talk about the efforts deployed by Ocean Race, very similar to IMOCA. You have a couple of minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
And of course, do it in English.
And you can speak in English.
Il y a 5 heures, parlant de français. So thank you very much, and I think all the good speeches have done all the talking. We know what the problems are, we know the solutions, and the passion that you have expressed, everyone speaking, that's so strong. And the Ocean Race has been racing for 50 years around the world in legs with a team. And we know that this race for the planet is not really a race. They call it a race because there is not one winner. We win together. And what's victory? To me, victory is to leave this planet saying it was better now than when I came onto the planet. So that's my goal. But now we are all in this together, and we will do our little part. If you wish, we will carry this appeal for the oceans with the Nature's Baton. Here it is. This is the Nature's Baton, initiated by Peter Thompson from the He's the UN Ocean Conference head and the special envoy for the ocean. So we'll carry the messages for everyone to Lisbon. Thank you very much, and well done.
Thank you so much. And now I'm very happy that for this specific occasion that our Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs is with us. Pip Hare, where is Pip Hare? Pip. So would you be so kind? Qu'est-ce qui se passe pour les panneaux à signer? Okay. Two things, Pip. You have this one is a better one. It's the same, but you can read it more easily. So, Pip, we shall read only one exemplar of the appeal from the sailors to the political authorities around the world, and Pip will do that. Then afterwards, our dear minister who has interested in sea for decades, centuries, I would say, will make his comments. And when we leave afterwards, please come and it's symbolic, of course. It's for the photographs. We already have your signatures, but please don't hesitate to come here and to put your signature on this paper when I will close the meeting and before leaving the room. And now, Pip, the microphone is yours.
We, yacht racers, transoceanic rowers, ocean explorers, deep-sea divers, refuse all deadly fatalism for oceans. In 2013, the maritime community launched the Paris Appeal for the High Seas. It has not been heard. For almost 10 years, under the aegis of the United Nations, international negotiations concerning more than half of the Earth's surface have gone nowhere due to lack of real political commitment by states. However, the oceans feed us in great quantities, provide half the oxygen in our atmosphere, and capture a significant portion of our greenhouse gas emissions, thereby balancing severe climate disruption. While the oceans enable almost all goods trade, they are also a permanent link between countries and cultures of the entire world, inspiring poets and artists, and are a source of dreams for children on all continents, even more than the moon and space. The oceans are our last common space of freedom and our final frontier. Our responsibility as seafarers with regards to the oceans, which are increasingly attacked, weakened and in poor health, has led us to issue a final cry of alarm. Human beings are doomed if they continue poisoning and asphyxiating the oceans. The One Ocean Summit in Brest must bring to an end this shocking destruction of our common resource that is vital to us all. We are therefore using this opportunity to call on the world's leaders to take an immediate, resolute, coherent and sustainable initiative. We are aware of the well-intentioned but insufficient actions that have already been undertaken. We are especially aware that without their acceleration, without the simultaneous drafting of an extensive strategy, and without decisions covering every aspect of the challenge within the decade, the Earth will not survive the death of the oceans. We are not better or more exemplary, but more aware of the state of the oceans. We're putting our legitimacy at the service of the future of the Earth. The expression, oceans, common heritage of mankind, first coined in Montego Bay 40 years ago, must finally inspire leaders of states and multilateral organizations. For oceans are immense, with 1,000 horizons spanning 3/4 of the globe. They are finite and fragile, and their balances are being exponentially threatened. While aware of the wrath and sometimes cruelty of the oceans, we believe that human beings can no longer ignore their crucial benefits. Our footprints must no longer disfigure them, betray their grandeur, and prevent them from fulfilling their missions to enable living beings to breathe, to act as a main driving force of the planet's climate machinery, to unite human beings instead of dividing them, and to save them instead of drowning them. But we are merely the ones sounding the alarm. We do not have the competence, nor the legitimate and necessary power to decide and implement complex solutions. For this is the challenge, honor, and duty of those who govern. Nevertheless, inspired by the excellent values oceans uphold, we cannot evade this fact. These unique global commons, natural resources, can only be safeguarded and managed sustainably through shared, transparent, democratic international governance. The seemingly utopian nature of this observation must not be an excuse for inaction or slow negotiation of treaties at a time when the world cannot wait. The only ambitious but reasonable path is a peaceful and exemplary co-construction of states. It is up to them to organise themselves, while allowing some who are more proactive to take the lead, to upset habits, to refuse the arrogance of those who claim to know better, defeatism, the accumulation of obstacles that are more difficult to move than mountains. It is up to states to restore the prestige of having the courage to govern. It is up to them to change tack if necessary, but without straying from the course, with the interests of the public's good and the urgency of the situation as sea marks. It is important, therefore, at Brest, to step up negotiations on the high seas so that they may be concluded in 2022, increase the number of marine protected areas meeting international criteria, call for more commitments from member countries of the International Maritime Organization, take stock of risks to the water column and seabeds, objectively evaluate initiatives inspired first by communication, publicly denounce states or actors who do not comply with rules, create an international scientific platform for the oceans, modelled after the IPCC, and establish a major international event dedicated to oceans so they are no longer an appendix to meetings devoted to climate or biodiversity. Basically, it is now important to help human beings break the deadly cycle that dooms oceans, something already achieved when it comes to the ozone layer. Even if the rest of the world continues to ignore these demands, Europe cannot fail. It is home to the world's leading maritime sector and must not be ashamed of showing the major powers that it wants to take back leadership for the cause of the oceans. Since this One Ocean Summit in Brest is the main environmental event of the current French presidency of the Council of the European Union, President Macron and Europe must rise to the challenge in terms of commitments to repair the ocean. For the oceans in which our future lies, to promote the most effective means of tackling climate change and threats that have a fatal impact on biodiversity, we commend the creation in Brest of the One Ocean Summit, and we sign this call, which we are issuing to the leaders of the planet.
Les textes en français et en anglais sont disponibles ici, imprimés pour ceux qui ne les auraient pas encore.
So the documents in French and English are here, printed for those who haven't read them yet. Jean-Yves, Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs.
Bienvenue.
Welcome.
Si tu préfères t'asseoir.
So if you wish to stand or sit yourself, as you wish. You will be saying the last few words to say goodbye, but it's very good. It will close our working session. It's been very enriching, active, very lively, and I really hope that over the next 2 months, since the work has been organized, that governments and the government will be able to obtain information and develop maybe new thought processes to carry on with the objective that you announced a while ago, and in order to accelerate and speed up the movement to protect the oceans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francis. I'm sorry for this unusual scenario because I am, in fact, been entrusted by the organization to conclude a discussion that I have not participated in, which is a complicated exercise, even if I'm used to doing things like this. But imagine I am in a difficult situation. Anyway. Secondly,
quand je regarde les visages qui sont
when I look at the faces here,
les amis qui sont là,
the friends who are here,
j'ai quand même le sentiment de
I have the feeling
jouer à la maison, quoi.
of being home,
Chez moi.
being at home.
Et je voudrais vous le dire, tout le plaisir
And it's such a pleasure
que j'ai néanmoins de conclure
that I have to conclude the proceedings
que vous
in
êtes
which I did not participate because you're there and because it's you,
et les navigateurs.
sailors.
Et puis, il y a eu ce texte.
And then there was this text that I knew, which is of itself a real conclusion. What I wanted to say, first of all, was to thank you for this initiative,
Remercier singulièrement
to thank you, Jimmy Pahun, because as a parliamentarian, he's extremely active in the organization of all of this. I didn't cite all of the sailors.
Je vais pas tous vous citer qui est
I
là.
can't cite you all because I might forget some, and afterwards I'm gonna get mad at me. I talked about Jimmy as a parliamentarian and spokesperson for the sailors that are here. Is that okay with you guys? Is that gonna work for you?
Vous avez déjà parlé?
We're already angry.
Je n'ai cité qu'un seul, donc je vais me fâcher.
I only mentioned one, so anyway.
Le porte-parole. C'est lui le porte-parole.
He's a spokesperson, so you can criticize him. Thank you, in any case, for this response to the call, which is a testimony to your awareness of the risks and threats which weigh upon the ocean. This is not new. This is not the first time you've said it, but what's good is that you're saying it together right now.
C'est ça la grande initiative.
And that's the big initiative here.
Appel
that you've taken.
Mais aussi une forme d'appel à l'aide.
It's also a call for help.
À l'aide des océans, vous en êtes.
Help for the ocean.
Je considère cet appel.
I consider that this call
vous étiez vous-même
is though you are spokespeople for the ocean.
Quelque sorte par
which you are.
Vos enthousiasmes et
your enthusiasm and your stories testimony to that. I also wanted to say that I fully share
les écrits, les passages.
What's been written and the major passages of this text.
Ne pas à la mort de l'océan.
The earth will not survive the death of the ocean. If you continue, will asphyxiate the ocean, and the issue is really that. It's beyond the future of the ocean. The ocean is the future of the planet and our own collective destiny.
Et puis, comme je sors d'une réunion,
and since I've just come out of a meeting where I didn't conclude,
où on évoquait l'enjeu,
where we're talking about the European issue,
l'Europe de la mer,
the Europe of the sea.
Ce n'est pas un hasard si
it's not nothing that we wanted to talk about that here, and the European Union is taking the initiative to develop, during the French presidency, to develop a maritime strategy, which is strong, because
la puissance,
we are
pour l'Europe, qui a
the power in Europe that has the biggest issue, the most at stake and the biggest presence in the oceans. So, in a certain way, we need to be the locomotive of this action. I'm reading your text, both as a call for help, an urgent call for help, but also an expression of real will to accelerate all of the actions that need to be taken. Otherwise, we'll be faced with failure. And we only have 10 years to do this, not more. But I don't think I've anticipated on the commitments that will be taken tomorrow. What I find the most striking here is the response to political authorities that were invited by the President of the Republic, but I wasn't expecting to have such enthusiasm in so many people, because it was brass, but it was obviously attractive, but because I didn't imagine that there could be so much awareness raised about the commitments towards the ocean, and to have tomorrow a huge geographical diversity of heads of state, which are all spokespeople for somebody and something. Because the presidency is coming here, it's because he's the president of the future COP. If the president of Ghana is coming, it's because he's the president of all of the Western Africa countries. He is carrying something by coming here. So we need to make it such that these commitments be respected. And I can see three major things that are going to be mobilizing us, and perhaps they will become a reality tomorrow.
Ça passe par d'autres instances en particulier.
In particular, it could be, there's going to be a meeting in Nairobi and in Lisbon, but the first commitment is to accelerate, which is indispensable, if possible in 2022, the BBNG treaty. You've spoken about that. I know it's taking time. That's why we're taking initiatives now, starting tomorrow, so that we can have an ambitious agreement, a universal agreement, an operational and effective, in order to create protected areas on the high seas, but also to carry out environmental impact assessments for activities that pollute the marine environment, which is central. And you're mobilized as well about that. That's the first point. I'd also like to say a word about the Coalition for an Exemplary Mediterranean in 2030 that we launched at the IUCN World Conservation Congress in Marseille last September. This coalition aims to relaunch regional cooperation in the protection of marine biodiversity and boost discussions in multilateral and regional fora dedicated to the environment and fisheries management by 2030. There's a lot of conflicts involved in that, and protection of whales, and coastal water treatment plants and so forth. So a lot of those things need to be dealt with to reach our goals by 2030 so that the Mediterranean will be an exemplary. And I think in the future there will be commitments that will be initiated in this respect. And thirdly, and I hope this will also be signified in what's going to be said tomorrow, and that is the implementation of a future binding international instrument on plastic pollution. There's an urgent meeting in Nairobi on the environment to be held this month in Nairobi. As you know, this is a major issue for us, for me. And I think we can't, there's no incantations here. The temptation would be, you know, in the UN, sometimes it's incantations. It raises awareness to a certain extent, which is already a good thing. But in your text, you're very alarmed. You're expressing this alarm. And I think we need to implement the conditions such that we can have an international instrument that is binding. Congratulations, but this is an incredible thing. And I think that if we don't get mobilized, you, me, everybody, to reach that, to have a constraining project with obligations, with constraints, including financial constraints, we will not succeed. I think that the major issue of Nairobi is to launch this in Nairobi. There'll be a procedure after that. Are we ready to do that, to start this project on plastic in Nairobi? I think we are. And I think this is what we're doing here is going to contribute to that. And I'm thinking about your call and the strength of what your appeal has as people of skill in what you do, and will breathe additional life into the dynamics that hopefully the President will be speaking about tomorrow. It's up to him to do that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Merci, Jean-Yves.
Thank you, Jean-Yves.
Tu sais l'affection qu'a le monde.
You know the affection that we have for you, and it's been like that for years now.
Ce soir, ce qu'il y a, c'est que maintenant, on va te mettre la pression.
But now we're going to have to apply pressure, because if it doesn't work, you know.
En particulier, ça serait vraiment une excellente.
In particular, it would be excellent news if there are a lot of sailors here
on se bat beaucoup pour
with whom we've been fighting side by side about plastics. So, thank you so much for your commitment. I think it is now time to close the meeting.
Farewell, friendly au revoir.
So we'll say a friendly farewell
auditors,
to our British auditors or English-speaking auditors.
on the TV, on their computers, and of course here. Merci beaucoup à tous. Ça a été un engagement. C'est dommage.
Thanks to all. It's unfortunate. Maybe I had a lot of important meetings as well, and I couldn't attend this one, which is extremely lively and positive and full of commitment.
Merci à tous.
Thanks to all. And we will be seeing you soon. Don't forget, the communication is true. We've already got your signatures, but do step up to the front and re-sign this big paper thing. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.